Okay, if you don't know me, I've been prepping probably for 15 years, and I live in a 40-foot school bus and travel around. And right now I just happen to be in the area of Denver, Colorado. But I live full-time in my bug-out vehicle, fully off-grid, 1,500 watts of solar, a whole bunch of water, all the things you need, lots of storage to live comfortably, completely off-grid in the event of something like this. And one of my hobbies is I collect radioactive things. So I go to thrift stores and antique stores and stuff, and we find radioactive glass, uranium glass or Vaseline glass, sometimes they call it. And then we also we find like Fiesta ware and other things that have uranium glaze on it, and they glow under a black light and stuff. You may have seen them. And then I also collect. I go out and mine uranium ore. I go out with one of my detectors and locate ore, and I dig it out of the ground. So I have quite a selection of that stuff, and I'll show you some a little bit later. One of the other hobbies I collect some of these different things here. As you can see the picture below, this is just some of the stuff I have right here. I actually have a gamma spectrometer behind me for identifying radioactive isotopes. And so, but during this hobby, it's given me a massive insight on how to measure and how to detect radiation and things that most people don't know much about. So I want to share some of that with you. Why? Another how to survive a nuclear bomb video. There's tons of them, and believe me, I've watched almost all of them. I've spent a lot of time watching these videos because I want to know, what's out there and what they're telling me. Is it true or not? And now that I have much more knowledge about radioactivity, I wanted to see if these guys were saying the right thing. And also I did some other research on different gear and stuff like that that might go against what you've already know. So let's jump in here. Most videos are repetition of other videos. There's not enough research. It does seem like a lot of these videos are just like going to the CDC website and kind of reading line from line. Some of them are a mix of like their prepping experience mixed with what the CDC says or the whoever, and so they seem like a lot of repetition. And so I wanted to kind of freshen it up a bit. Plus, we all know that CDC guidelines don't necessarily mesh very well with what preppers would do. And so we have an insight into things that maybe the CDC doesn't necessarily know about. Some of the other stuff is like, a lot of these videos just don't get into the science very much. And I really feel strongly that you need to know, the more you know about the subject, the more likely you're going to be able to come up with a good plan. And if you don't know, you're not going to have a good plan. These videos don't have a lot of detection gear guidance, and this is my thing. I love these little things, man. I love this stuff. So I want to teach you a little bit about that. And then understanding the threats of radiation and understanding more on how to decontaminate yourself. And then sometimes they kind of push unnecessary gear. So let's just jump in and talk about this stuff. Okay. This is a roughly current list of items within the Russian nuclear arsenal. And as you can see, there's well over 1,000 different warheads that can come towards us, okay? So for instance, in the SS-18 one up here, they have 460 of these things, but each one of them has 10 warheads on board. MIRV is multiple independent reentry vehicles, meaning they can shoot one over here and over here and over here and over here, and they can hit 10 different targets with one missile. We also, as the United States, have a lot of the same thing. I think we only carry 3 per, but at any rate, that's a lot of warheads. So we want to be aware of what's coming our way. For the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and pick the 800 kiloton yield missile here because that's the biggest one that we know of that they would possibly shoot at us. And so all of our bombs are going to be in these examples going to be 800 kilotons. All right, getting into the actual explosion. Milliseconds after this thing detonates, the massive fireball is created. The yellow circle you see there represents the size of a fireball of an 800 kiloton weapon. That's like 20 city blocks. Anything inside there is incinerated. I mean, just nothing left, because the temperatures are extraordinary. We're talking in the realm of 15 million degrees Kelvin. And it just incinerates, melts everything. Nothing, if you're in there, you're done, okay? Moving on, something not very much talked about is the neutron blast, and it does depend on the altitude of this. In this simulation, the bomb was detonated at the altitude that maximizes all of the effects of the bomb, okay? Some of them are detonated higher, some are detonated on the ground, so the scientists have figured out how to kill you the best way. And so this green circle represents the neutron blast. The significance of this neutron blast is multifaceted. One, if you're within that green zone, you are instantly going to get a massive, massive dose of radiation from neutrons. In fact, you'll actually be radioactive for a moment there before you die of all the destruction, because you're going to be pretty close to a lot of the dangerous blast effects. But if you were to survive the blast effects, you would take a very, very significant dose of radiation that you probably wouldn't survive, okay? Unless you were like, happened to be in the parking garage or something when this went off and survived it all, you'd probably still get radiation sickness. The neutron blast is something that's not very much talked about. One of the other side effects of it is that when you take normal everyday objects and you bombard them with neutrons, they become radioactive in themselves. So they become an actual, whatever the material's made of, it becomes an isotope of that material. So, you know, you'll get an aluminum that's normally just a stable thing. You don't hear about radioactive aluminum very much. You bombard it with neutrons, now you have radioactive aluminum, very short half-life. And that means it's very radioactive. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, because the neutron blast is also irradiating everything that goes inside the dust, all the rocks, everything that's there and that's getting ejected into the atmosphere is going to probably be neutron activated by the blast as well. So that leads to a lot of the fallout stuff that we're going to be talking about. The blinding flash. This goes back to the fireball. The fireball creates that blinding flash because it is so intensely white hot that, and there's so much energy released, that you get this brilliantly bright white light. Well, mixed in with that is heat, infrared heat. And that infrared heat is responsible for blinding you, for catching you on fire, for burning your skin, sunburns, and so on. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, right there, that house right there was catching on fire instantly from that flash. So imagine if you were standing next to that house right there, your clothes would burst into flames. You would instantly have major burns on your body just from that flash. And this flash, I'll show you where I'm at. I am actually down here in, down by Littleton right here. And that's like 10 miles away. So I'm just outside the major burn radius, 3rd-degree burns guaranteed, of this blast. So I'm right in the area of getting 2nd-degree burns, where technically more painful than 3rd-degree burns. So very important to duck and cover. If you see this bright light going, if you're out of the way of it, don't poke your head around what the hell is that? You know, don't do that. Also, major fires are going to start everywhere from this. Everything it's touching is going to catch on fire. And the blast radius, the actual destructive damage radius, the major damage, is actually inside this circle. All right, here's the blast damage I was just talking about. So we have this inside the red here, major damage. Absolutely pulverizes everything in that area. Nothing's going to be standing. This isn't a Hiroshima bomb anymore. This is way more powerful. So everything in there, done. And then you get to the next area here, this area, and that is the severe damage to regular houses like you and me would probably be living in. You know, wood frame houses, flattened. Okay, major damage. Outside of that, there's, you know, intermediate damage and light damage, but, you know, those two circles there are major damage. You notice I left the circle for the blinding flash because I wanted to show you how significantly powerful that flash is. It's way outside of the damage radius of this. All right, here's something pretty interesting, and that is the actual sound of the nuclear explosion. And most people don't get an opportunity to hear something like this, so let's play it for you. Here it comes. So not what, definitely not what Hollywood has taught you about the sound, huh? So there's really two types of detonations. One is an airburst, and they've calculated that if it's at some specific height for a specific yield of bomb, that blast will cause the most damage from up there, right? And then they also know that a ground burst, if there's a bunker, if they were going for the White House and the president's down in the Peoc down there, then they're going to do ground burst to try to destroy that. And so they're going to be hitting the ground. Now, the difference is the fallout that comes out of this. An airburst doesn't have as much fallout as a ground burst. Airburst still has fallout, but the ground burst has significantly more fallout. So if you have the wherewithal, you hear this, you're in the bathroom and doors closed, and you're sitting there, you're on your phone, and you hear boom, and it shakes your house. You're like, Jesus Christ, what was that? So you hurry up and you go outside and look, and you see a mushroom cloud because you missed the flash. A bunch of things are on fire, smoke columns going up everywhere, but you see a mushroom cloud over there. You can look at that and determine very quickly if it's an airburst or a ground burst. The airburst will, first of all, the sound will be very distinct pop, where if it's on the ground burst, it could be just, the sound could be muddled a little bit. Secondly, you'll see a lot, the mushroom cloud, the stalk of the mushroom is going to be very dark in color. If you have a very light colored one, it's more likely to be an airburst than a ground burst. But if you have that really dark, dirty, dusty cloud, that's going to be a ground burst. And again, it goes back to the fallout. It's very important to potentially estimate what you're going to be dealing with. If you can note what direction that thing is starting to lean, that will also tell. If you see it leaning one direction or another, you potentially may not be in the fallout zone. So that's another thing to keep in mind. A lot of things to take in here, but all these things can help you. All right, so just because you see one mushroom cloud doesn't mean there's not going to be more of them. The thing is that you saw how many missiles they have. If you live in an area that potentially has some kind of target, they may assign a few more warheads to you. Okay, Washington, D.C. is estimated to have between 4 and 8 warheads directed at them. So expect to see more than one mushroom cloud. Here's the thing though, they're not going to, they potentially won't be coming from all the same missile. So you might have a missile launched just outside of, in Belarus, and then you have a missile launched from, way inside the interior of Russia, and those are launching. One of them is going to get there first, and then you're going to hit by another one. So be aware, just because you saw it and like, oh, God, I'm glad I survived that. That doesn't mean the second one's not coming your way and could finish you off. So getting into shelter as fast as you can is super important. Get yourself underground if you can, because the potential for multiple impacts is pretty high. Knowing the prevailing wind where you live, you probably already do and you don't even realize it. You just go outside and the wind's always coming from one direction. Take note, that's important. Knowing the prevailing wind and then seeing where the mushroom cloud is may put you outside the fallout zone, and you may not need to shelter like you would if you were going to be in the fallout zone. Okay, but that doesn't mean these fallout clouds are huge. So if you have something way off, if you have a wind that comes in from the east, you can expect that cloud might reach you all the way from over there. So keep that in mind. If you have cities, east or wherever from the direction the wind comes, you might be in line for getting some fallout from that. So be aware. Here's the fallout thing. Now in this simulation here, I went ahead and did a ground burst so you can just see the significant size of this thing. Denver is just this right here. And Denver's a pretty big place. And this fallout cloud is enormous, okay? Obviously the darker areas are gonna be your more severe fallout, and the lighter areas, not as much fallout, but every bit as radioactive, okay? So keep that in mind when you see this, when you're calculating wind drift and everything like that, you know, be aware. Also, you need to get to shelter like as fast as you can. You have about 10 to 15 minutes, but that's not a hard and fast rule. Before this stuff starts raining down on you, you're gonna have radioactive ash, you're gonna have radioactive dust, you're gonna have things that were absolutely pulverized in the blast, carried up into the air, and now it's like the finest moon dust you can ever, you know, you've walked in that dust where your foot just poof right into it, like that. So keep that in mind. You'll be experiencing that in fallout, except it's gonna be extraordinarily dangerous. The radiation levels are spectacularly high. You will just not, like this is like when Chernobyl blew up and all the firefighters went in there and then they all died, at least that high. Very, very, very high. What happened at Chernobyl, you know, a nuclear power plant is fission and a nuclear bomb is fission. So you have the same products, fission products that are left over from that. Only in this case, these are getting blown all over the place and those just kind of stayed in the yard. So you want to avoid that. I'll put a link in the description for this nuke simulator so you can yourself nuke your own town to see what's going on based on your prevailing winds, so you can kind of get an idea of where all this stuff might be. Sheltering from fallout. This is kind of an overview of what we're about to go into. Distancing yourself from the fallout, shielding yourself from the fallout. Is there even fallout? All right, if you're a photographer, you probably already know about the inverse square rule, but basically what that means is every time you double your distance, the amount of light or radiation is 4 times less. So the further you get away from the source of radiation, the less radiation you're going to be receiving by 4 times every time you double that. So that's why when you're sheltering, you want to get right to the center of your the structure you're in to minimize the stuff that's building up on the outside walls of your house or wherever you're at. But also don't forget, your roof might be the closest thing to you, and that might be your biggest threat, okay? If you got a basement or your own shelter, that's awesome, you're good to go. If you're in a building, get to the center of the building, go up. Don't go all the way to the roof, stay away from the roof, go down. If you're in, it's like a big tall building, go up like 10 floors. And now nothing's really sticking to the side of the building, all that stuff's on the ground, and you've really removed yourself from that radiation. Okay, scientists have figured out what kind of shielding is going to be good. Now, when this happens, your biggest and most immediate threat is gamma radiation. Okay, later on, a lot of other threats, you know, rear their ugly heads, but right now, when you're trying to shelter yourself, is gamma radiation. It is going to be extraordinarily high, stuff that like normal Geiger counter won't measure that high. They'll just be pegged, or it'll even go quiet. Okay, so they figured out that that certain amounts of stuff will cut gamma in half, and so if you have multiple thicknesses of it, then you can bring the gamma radiation down to very acceptable levels. So for instance, if you have walls of 4 inches of lead all the way around you, all 6 sides of you, I guess, you can reduce it by 1,000 times. That's pretty good. And if you reduce it by 1,000 times, you should be okay in there. But none of us have a lot of lead lying around. Now, what you might have is concrete. If you have a basement, you have that concrete. Outside the concrete, you have dirt. And so that stuff is going to be protecting you. The best thing that we have, as the poors that we are, is packed soil. And now if you have yourself an underground bunker, 6 feet underground, that is a significant amount of shielding. And you won't, if you were down there with a Geiger counter, you may not even detect an elevated level of radioactivity down there. Now, when the fallout falls, we talked about this stuff being super radioactive. So, but how long is it radioactive? Well, we talked about the reason it's radioactive is because the half-lives of these things are very short. And when you have radioactive things with very short half-life, they are giving up the ghost, man. They're just like, ah! And they are very radioactive. Excuse me. So, it follows that curve. And so, here it is, it says, at the time of detonation, if the fallout is 1,000 Roentgens per hour, we'll talk about them a little bit, then in 7 hours it'll only be 100 Roentgens. So for every sevenfold, let me just read that. Fallout decays rapidly, 7 to 10 rule. For every 7-fold increase in time after detonation, there's a 10-fold decrease in radiation rate. So after 7 hours, the radiation rate is only 10% of the original, and after 49 hours, it's 1%. So you can do the math there. 7 times 7 is 49, and it goes way down. Now that's not saying, oh, 48 hours, we made it, because that's not the case, okay? This measurement over here of 10 Roentgens per hour is a significant amount of radiation, and if you're caught in that, then you're going to get sick. You shouldn't be outside yet. So my rule of thumb is just stay there for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. If you get there for 2 weeks, then those radiations will be virtually gone and non-existent. You'll still have some other longer-term radiations we're going to discuss in just a second, but the main gamma radiation threat is going to be will have mitigated itself. Here's some of the long-term fallouts. You don't hear about a lot of these because some of them still have very short half-lives. So, you know, you have some that are 59 days, 66 days, 40 days, and stuff like that. But a couple of them in there have a fairly significant amount, and that is cesium-137 and strontium-90. Cesium-137, I have a sample of something called trinitite, and it's actually the glass that was created from the intense heat of the first atomic bomb in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And I can put that in my gamma spectrometer, and the biggest peak on there is cesium-137. It's still there after how long? What are we, 80 years later? Yeah. So cesium-137, half-life doesn't mean it's gone, it just means it's half as strong after that period of time. So it still takes a long time to go away. So strontium-90 has a tendency to want to stick in your bones. And so if you get it inside of you, the particles can actually melt, you know, inside your tissue and then get in your bloodstream. And if it gets in your bloodstream, it will store itself and replace calcium in your bones. So it's going to be very difficult to remove that once you get it in you. So protecting yourself from that is very important, and we'll talk about that. Cesium-137 is a strong gamma radiation source, so that's why it's not necessarily safe to just go running around outside and you're fine now. Actually, it will gather in different places depending on the wind, building up against walls, or if it rains and it washes down into a low area. You got a place in your driveway that has a puddle, and you'll probably find some in there, okay? Now, this is my favorite part because I love measuring radiation, and it actually took me a while to figure out how to measure radiation because it's not intuitive. And but I'm going to give you some good fast rules, just things to remember when measuring radiation, so you know if it's safe or not. These are just simple rules, okay? But we need to know what our threats are. Gamma radiation. Gamma radiation is actually a photon, one photon. Light is a whole bunch of photons. Gamma radiation is a very powerful, fast-moving photon that can penetrate all the way through you. It's not the most dangerous radiation, but in the event if there's a lot of it, it is a very dangerous radiation, okay? Beta radiation is not as powerful, but it will penetrate your skin a little bit into your body. And you may have heard like the nuclear tan. Those guys that were exposed to a lot of radiation, like in Chernobyl. You should watch that series, very good. But these guys will be like bronze colored. That's the beta radiation giving them that bronze tan. Don't go asking your tanning bed, do you have any beta tans? Anyway, moving on, alpha. Alpha particles are basically 2 protons and 2 neutrons. That's helium. Now, it's heavy. in compared to these other ones. So it packs a punch, but because it's so heavy, it doesn't go very far. In fact, in air, it only travels a couple inches in air. Won't even go through a piece of paper. But if you get it inside of you, it won't penetrate your skin. Even the epidermis, the dead layer of skin, all the very outer layer of skin is all dead. Hate to tell you that, but it is. And it won't even go through that. But if you get it inside of you and you get it into the mucous membranes and all the different, squamous cells, and I'm a paramedic. So if you get that stuff inside of you, then it's just right up against it. And it's just doing that until you get cancer there. So if you breathe this stuff in, that's bad. If you have breathed something that produces alpha radiation, that's bad. And unfortunately, in the event of something like this, a lot of different isotopes produce all these 3 different things. And some of them just produce more of one than another, okay? All right, measuring high levels of radiation. Don't think just because you have a Geiger counter, you are good to go, because the radiation levels we're talking about will absolutely make your Geiger counter just sit there and cry. It just won't. You won't measure. It's too high. Fallout radiation is so extraordinarily radioactive that you want to be sure that you have something that can measure these things, because you can take fatal doses in minutes if you go out in this stuff. That's why I recommend stay inside for 2 weeks. That bad stuff, real bad stuff, should be gone by then. But how do you know? Get yourself a meter, okay? This is a CDV, Civil Defense Victorine, CDV 717. The cool thing about it, as you can see in the picture, is that it comes apart. It has this big long cable, and you can hook it up to the piece on the right, stick it out by an exterior wall or outside or whatever, and have the other one on the inside and hooked up to your meter, and you'll be able to tell how much radiation is. I love this thing, but it's boring. You know why it's boring? Because I do not have enough radioactive material, and believe me, I've got some, that will move this needle. Nothing. I've got nothing. And so this thing just sits here. I can make the needle move by, adjusting this little knob right here and the zero, zeroing it. But that's it. That's all I got. This thing won't do anything until that time. And then this is going to be the most valuable piece of equipment that you have. Okay. If you buy one on eBay, you can get them between 80 and 120 bucks roughly. It's probably going to need calibration. If you go on eBay, there's actually kits, and they're the actual original civil defense kits in a wooden box and everything that has one of these, or the one that doesn't have the detachable, but just it's all built into it. And it has a Geiger counter, which is going to be handy, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And it also has dosimeters, another thing that's going to be really handy. So these things you're going to want to know. Okay. Let's see. All right. Geiger counters. This is my favorite Geiger counter. I love this little guy. It's kind of like the industry standard for, measuring radiation and stuff. It's rugged, it's cool looking. Looks like what a Geiger counter is supposed to be, where you have like a handle and you got your wand, or, trying to figure this out. But the main reason you want to have this isn't so you know how much radiation is around you, because it's going to be significantly high. Though it is useful for that after the main fallout's gone. This will give you some pretty good indication of how long you should be there. But for decontamination, you have to have it. Okay, let me show you. These right here are a few different radioactive sources I have, and I use these for calibration and stuff like that on my gamma spectrometer mainly. Okay, so let's just pretend I'm decontaminating myself here. Okay, so I just came in from outside and I washed off and everything. I think I'm good. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. And so kind of going over your body here with this thing, going in your hair, make sure everything's okay. Going, oh, missed a spot. That's why. You don't want to have radioactive contamination on you while you are in your safe place, okay? That's why it's so important to make sure that you have a Geiger counter so you can decontaminate yourself, okay? And we're gonna get into dosages, but I'm gonna tell you right now that radiation is an accumulated hazard, meaning just because you're out of it doesn't mean everything's fine now. You may have accumulated a dose enough to later on get cancer. It's that simple. And so keeping these low doses down are really important. And so having a way of knowing how radioactive things are is extremely important. All right, a little plug here. This is my company, Radioactive Everything, where you can get yourself your own little test source to test out your fancy, shiny new Geiger counter. Okay, I go out and dig this stuff up myself out of the ground, and then I process, I break it in little pieces for you, and I try to keep them all the same size, but it's impossible. But these are spicy little pieces of rock, and if you have a Geiger counter or something like that, and you need something to test it out with, this is it. It's normally $49.99, okay, but which is actually cheaper than each of these little dudes. But if you use the code BUSFACE, BUSFACE, you'll get $10 off, $39.99, and you can have your own little test source to test your Geiger counter out, all right? All right, let's move on. All right, dosimeters. What is a dosimeter? A dosimeter keeps track of the dose of radiation you're taking. So we talked about the cumulative effect of radiation and keeping it low. Now, if you go outside and let's say it's 1 Roentgen per hour out there and you're out there for 3 hours, so you've absorbed 3 Roentgens, okay? Well, there's a limit to the number of Roentgens you can take in a lifetime before your chance of dying of fatal cancer becomes 50% or more. And I'll show you that slide here in a minute. So, that you're going outside and you are borrowing time. And so you need to be aware that the dose that you are collecting, just because you feel fine doesn't mean it's not causing some pretty long-term damage or potentially near-term damage that you could die from. So having a dosimeter is what you want, okay? Here is a simple dosimeter I have. It's actually a little Geiger slash, it's called by a company called Better Geiger. And I got really nice guy. I was kind of mean to him, so I owe him an apology. I'm sorry. This thing not only is a Geiger counter, so it can measure radiation, it also keeps track of the dose that you are accumulating. So it tells you that you have, been out in some high radiation and how much you have taken into your body that you can't ever get rid of, okay? That's what it is. The ones on the right, the civil defense ones, I wish I could show you mine, but it's in the mail right now. I finally found the Bendix one I was looking for, which is the best one. The Bendix ones never break. The other ones had some issues. Bendix one does not have those issues. And the one I got is actually this one, exact one right here. So I have 10 pens with it. And those pens are kind of cool. You charge them up, you just put that thing in your right here in your pocket, right? And you can walk around and do your thing, or you can put it down in your shoe, down in your sock or something. That's actually, you're going to be closer down there to the radiation, so that's a better place to put it. Then you take it out and you can look through it, and it will tell you you have absorbed this much. So you take that thing when you get back and you've deconned yourself, and you go inside, you pull your dosimeter, and then you write it down. And now you are keeping track of how much radiation. What's the importance of this other than knowing that number and knowing that you're getting close to cancerous levels? The other thing is, if you're with a group of people and one person has accumulated a lot more dosage than others, then it's time to share the danger with somebody else and make them do the task of going to get food or water or whatever needs. If you need to go outside, you might need to start sending somebody else. And that's why you want to keep track of this stuff, so that you can spread the love there. Roentgens, the Roentgen. Okay, if you watch a video and the guy calls it a Roentgen or Roentgen or anything like that, you might question them a little bit on their knowledge of the subject. It's pronounced Roentgen, and it's after Wilhelm Conrad Roentgen, and he's the guy who discovered X-rays. Cool. So the Roentgen isn't a measure of how radioactive something is. It's a measurement of how that radioactive thing will affect you. And the measurement is based on per hour. So instead of just saying, you know, you walk into an area with this meter and it just goes, oh, you're dead. Oh, dang it. I knew better. No, it tells you, oh my God, if you stay here for any length of time, you are going to get this much in you. You should turn around and go back the way you came. And that's what the Roentgen is there for, is to come up with something. It would be cool if you just had something that told you bad, good. But this is actually a more scientific way of keeping track of how bad this stuff is. And it helps you make positive life decisions, right? Okay, so we're going to go a little bit further into this. Calculating your dosage, okay? If your detector is reading 100 Roentgens per hour, that would be this one, because this one would be pegged. That's a very high dose. 100 Roentgens is significant. If this thing is reading 100 Roentgens, then, and you're in that area for 15 minutes, you've absorbed 25 Roentgens. That's how that works, okay? Easy math. You know, just divide it down, find, so you will know. Now, honestly, if you get in here and this thing says 100, you should run out of that area and get to someplace safer, okay? Because very quickly you could develop acute radiation syndrome. You don't want that. Your dosimeter is going to keep track of that time you were there. So when you ran out and you're like, geez, I wonder how much I got. Your dosimeter is going to keep track of that for you. And that's the important thing. How much is too much? This is where we get some nuts and bolts of how hot is hot. 500 Roentgens. So if this thing's reading 500 Roentgens and you stay there for an hour, you're going to die, most likely. LD50 rating of this. LD50 is 50% of the people who take this much aspirin at once is going to die. Same thing for this. The LD50 rating is 500 Roentgens, and most likely you're going to die from that. It's a significant amount of radiation, and you probably won't make it. For all intents and purposes of this video, I'm going to keep everything in full Roentgens so that you can kind of make it easier to correlate. I did the math to convert some of the smaller doses to decimals, so you can see the difference between small doses and, oh my God, doses, okay? 200 Roentgens. That's high enough that you're gonna get very sick, and there is a potential of lethality, okay? 100 Roentgens is, you're gonna get sick from that, but that's where they start to think that it's pretty survivable. But that might depend on whether or not you get professional health care, okay? And bringing your dosimeter in with you might be really important in that, because there's gonna be so many people with acute radiation sickness with unknown dosages. And when they triage all these patients with these unknown doses, they're gonna base that on when do you think you were exposed, and when did you start vomiting? Okay, and the shorter that distance is, and that's not linear, but the shorter that distance is, the higher dose that you have taken in. So if you were dosed and then 20 minutes or 10 minutes later you started throwing up, that was a pretty significantly high dose. Okay, if you got dosed and it was like 3 or 4 hours later that you started vomiting, that's not quite as high as dose. That's all they're going to base it on. You roll in with your dosimeter and say, this is what I got, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, this guy's totally savable. Let's go ahead and take care of him. We know he's going to make it. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's what I cannot stress this to you enough, to keep your dosages down. Okay, 30 Roentgens will cause mild radiation sickness, nausea, vomiting, but they say it shouldn't last too long. But there is still damage done to your body in that. Again, keep your doses low. I said spot here, short period of time. So if you accumulate a large dose, but it's over a period of years, you probably won't ever get acute radiation syndrome. You may still suffer from cancer from getting these large doses over time, but getting radiation syndrome, acute radiation syndrome, is probably not in the cards for you. However, short period of time, they say, refers to minutes to hours. There is no firm thing. They don't know enough about this to have very effective guidelines to give you. There's just no hard and fast rule. Everybody's different, and how you were exposed, where you were exposed, that kind of thing, and you just don't know until you're out of there already and you realize, oh my God, my leg hurts. There you go, leg got a massive dosing. Okay, so again, there is no good ionizing radiation in the scenario. We're not using this to cure cancer here. This is causing it, and this is some bad stuff. So keeping track of your dosage is very important, again, for long-term health. Sobering statistic. If you accumulate 100 Roentgens during your lifetime, you have a 50% chance of contracting fatal cancer. And in the fallout scenarios, you could be in a place and subject yourself to that kind of dose in minutes. That's how serious this is. Very big deal. Okay, here's some perspective for you so you can kind of liken it to other things and see how the big numbers we're talking about. If you get a full body CT scan, so for instance, you were in a car accident, a full body CT scan is 1 Roentgen, right there. So if you got 100 CT scans, you're probably going to get cancer. There you go. Every time you get a CT scan, you do significantly increase your risk of getting cancer, just to let you know. Mammogram, 0.04 Roentgens, not that much. Chest x-ray, 0.01 Roentgens. Again, not that much. Average annual dose from a background radiation, 0.62 Roentgens. So, you know, almost 3/4 of a Roentgen every year just for being alive. If you live in Denver, that's actually higher. If you lived like in California, the Colorado Plateau, the background radiation here, not only from altitude, but what's in the soil here, there's a lot of uranium, hence why I'm here, because I'm digging it up, is higher, so you get a higher dose, okay? Living next to a nuclear power plant, 0.001 Roentgens or less. Turns out, we're getting pretty good at making clean electricity, so all you tree huggers out there that think that the world's coming to an end because of global warming and we should stop driving cars, you want to go electric? Let's go with nuclear power. It's a lot safer. We were scared by 3 Mile Island, but it was so new, they didn't know what they were doing. We were scared by Chernobyl, but Chernobyl was a terrible designed reactor, and it was well known in the United States not to use a reactor like that. And they suffered the consequences of being dumb, and the Soviet Union was pretty dumb during that period of time. So, just to keep that in mind. Here's an interesting one, Cafe Pripyat. Pripyat's a small city outside of Chernobyl that you didn't know that was severely dosed after the reactor 4 blew up there at Chernobyl. It's 0.0013 Roentgens per hour on the steps of Cafe Pripyat. So that's actually not bad, and that means that these nuclear events are survivable. Okay, this stuff will go away. Inside Chernobyl's control room at the time of the accident, though, was a much different story at 10 to 15 Roentgens per hour. So these guys, when this happened, it was the beginning of their shift, they stayed all the next day. So the people in the control room there were dosed with enough radiation to give them cancer for sure. Most likely, they're going to get cancer from that. Because we're talking into the, 200 Roentgens over a period of time. Everybody in there got radiation sickness, and a couple of them died because they left and they actually went to turn little valves to get some water flowing, thinking that this thing hadn't blown up yet, and they got massive dosage and they died a horrible, horrible death, which is what happens when you get acute radiation sickness at those high levels, and it's a horrible, horrible, horrible way to die. Okay, let's talk about that. The picture's on the right there. Hisashi Ouchi. He is thought to be the person that has received the highest dose ever. He received 2,700 Roentgens. So we discussed what 500 will do to you. I'm probably not going to make it, right? He got 2,700. The upper left picture is him in the hospital, pretty much right when he got there. The one on the right is a few days later when all his hair is falling out and he's starting to get really, really sick. And then the bottom one is at the end of his life. They kept him alive longer and he wanted to stay alive. He's like, stop experimenting on me. So they put him in a coma and they kept him alive more. If you notice, his muscles are falling off of his body on his legs. I read about this. And radiation sickness at that level, what happens is you get a massive dose of radiation, okay? When you get those really big doses. And those really big doses do something horrible. They destroy all of your DNA. They ruin your bone marrow. And so you get, your body can't, your DNA is used to recreate cells, right? So if you, you know, like when your skin gets dry and falls off, that's all dead skin cells, but there's always replacing it. Always replacing it. Red blood cells and everything like that. When your DNA dies, then it doesn't have that roadmap to recreate these things, and so it doesn't. And your gut is particularly susceptible to this. And so those high doses of radiation, that's why you get the nausea and vomiting and everything like that. But even further than that, when your cells aren't regenerating, your body starts to decay and rot inside of you. And so you are decaying while you're still alive. And it's terribly painful and it's horrible. You bleed out your eyes, you're bleeding everywhere. Symptoms are not unlike Ebola in that respect. And there's a lot of pain involved. So keep your dose low. Okay. Acute radiation sickness, 30 to 70, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, or else anorexia. Recoverable bone marrow damage, full recovery from a few weeks to a couple of years. Just it depends on how you were dosed. Your bone marrow, you may not even know that you were still recovering, but your bone marrow and stuff may take time to get back to where it's making red blood cells and white blood cells, you know, in a decent amount of time. Okay, 7200, same outside effects, symptoms, but the possibility of death starts to become a reality in that. 2 to 500. Symptoms are anorexia, severe nausea, vomiting, cramps, diarrhea. Onset occurs within a few hours of exposure. 50% of the people exposed to these levels will die. So there you go. A lot of the symptoms are very similar, but the outcomes can be very different. 500 to 1,000, we don't even really need to talk about it because the recovery is not expected. Above 2,000, this actually has extreme your central nervous system. So nervousness and confusion, nausea, vomiting, unconsciousness, watery diarrhea, burning sensation to the skin, and it happens within minutes and you're not going to live. And it's going to be a horrible death. Keep your dose low, okay? One of the interesting little side effects on the helicopter pilots flying over Chernobyl dropping stuff, we're talking about this. As soon as they flew in the area, everybody was like, God, do you taste that? It tastes like metal. You get that metal taste in your mouth. So just a little sign there. Protecting your thyroid. Okay, one of the fissionable products that comes from fission, nuclear bomb, or a radioactive accident is iodine 131. And so your thyroid generally gets all of its iodine from the food you eat in the natural form. Stable iodine, it's in the soil, it's in your food, you eat it, but it loves iodine, it's always looking for it. So if any other iodine sources are introduced to this, such as a radioactive iodine, then you could potentially lose your thyroid to this, amongst other things, you know, getting thyroid cancer or, you know, terrible things like that. So what do you do about that, okay? Can you see it? There you go. Potassium iodide. They make all these fancy IO packs, IOstat or whatever like that. It's tactical versions. This has 60 tablets in it. I have 2 bottles. I got it for like $20. And in 1 bottle's enough. You only need to take this for 2 weeks. And 1 bottle's enough for me and my fiance. And I have a second bottle just in case, or for if I have some other people with me who don't have it. So, you know, it's FDA approved, it's everything like that. It's an over-the-counter drug. You don't have to buy these fancy ones. I wasn't able to find it at like the Walmart pharmacy in their little vitamin section, but it was easy to find online. So, and it's very inexpensive. So, the reason it works is because there is a limit to how much iodine your thyroid wants to eat. It gets full, if you will, and you can saturate it with non-radioactive iodine, and therefore the radioactive iodine can't get in and will probably pass out your urine or feces. Okay. And then here's a little dosage thing here. These are 65 milligrams, so I have to take 2 a day. It even says that on the bottle. It's a short-term medication. Don't take it for too long. But for adults 2, for children under 150 pounds 1, and then it goes down all the way to infants. There is liquid form you can get in droppers. So if you have a child or an infant, there you go. A case for pectin. This was really interesting. There was children in Russia who were exposed to high levels of cesium-37. I'm not positive it's from Chernobyl, but I think it was. Anyway, eating contaminated food and like grown in the soil. So they're growing vegetables, but this is where the fallout landed, and now cesium-137 is showing up in their lettuce and their carrots and their potatoes and stuff, and they're eating this, and now they have significant high levels of cesium-137. So they noticed that people were drinking a lot of apple juice had less contamination in them, and they traced it down to pectin. And so they did a blind study of a whole bunch of children there. They gave them food that wasn't contaminated because that's makes sense, right? And then they gave half of them a scoop of pectin and half of them a placebo scoop of some powder that doesn't do anything. And it reduced the amount of contamination in their gut by 66.7% versus 13.5% for the placebo. That is significant. Guess what? You can buy this stuff too. I got 2 bottles of this stuff. So that's a good case for me. So and it has both of these things have long shelf lives. The potassium iodide in this, like 10 plus years. So now in the event that I can take that because it's not dangerous, and if I eat anything that is even suspect but I can't detect with this, then I can take that. Now I do have a gamma spectrometer behind me, and I have a big old lead pig that it works inside of, so I can put my food in there and test it and see, and it detects tiny amounts of radioactivity, so I can see if my food is contaminated. Not everybody has that, obviously, but it is available. In fact, if you want to get your own, and it's about $400 and some odd, it's about this long. It has a built-in dosimeter. It's a scintillator counter, so it's very, very sensitive. So it's not really, it would be good for deconning, everything else. And it's about this long. The battery lasts like 2 weeks or longer every time you charge it. So it lasts a really long time. It's rechargeable. But it has a built-in gamma spectrometer. It's not as good as the bigger ones, but it can give you an idea of what's going on once you learn about gamma spectrometry, which the scope of that is not even relatively possible in this video. Okay, coming out of your shelter. Are the radiation levels acceptable enough? How do you know? Meters, things to measure it. You need to have things to measure this stuff, or you're just not going to know, right? If you do need to go outside, so if you're a lazy prepper and you only have 72 hours of food and water, then you might be coming out of there at the 72-hour mark looking for something to drink and something to eat, and you need to know how much radiation is out there before you just go wandering outside and give yourself this massive dose. Again, because the dose is cumulative. If you have to go out for some reason, get everything you need and come back and don't go out again. Okay? Keep that dosage low. And then you have to mitigate the contamination on you, and then you have to decon yourself coming back in, and then you need something to protect your lungs, okay? Because you don't want any of this stuff inside of you. Is it radiologically safe, okay? Is your high dose meter reading anything? This is a really good rule of thumb. Zero this thing in the house or inside your shelter, then take it outside. If you're on the 1 scale, you can see here, If you are on the 1 scale, that's a pretty high dose of radiation if you're getting 1 Roentgen per hour. So you're going to have to keep it short. Remember, you only get 100 of those and then you get cancer. At least 50% chance of cancer. You only get 100 hours outside in that. So you want to keep your dose low. So if it's 1 Roentgen per hour outside, keep it short. If this needle doesn't move, awesome, because now you're getting into the realm of much lower radiation. And then this is where this thing is going to come in to be able to actually measure the lower levels of radiation, or something like this to give you an idea of what it's like outside. You don't you don't put it right on the ground and go, oh my God, it's so high. You hold it up here at about waist level, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of what's hitting your body, okay? Or you can wear it down by your legs if you want to, because you will be closer to the radiation down there. Okay. Do you really even have to go outside, or you just want to look around and see what the neighborhood looks like? Just, it's better not to. All right, gas masks. So there is a lot, almost every single prepare for nuclear bomb video says you need to get a CBRN gas mask. And so, but being a paramedic, I've used CBRN gas masks before. I'm familiar with them. I was also in the military. I'm familiar with NBC and contaminations like that. So the reason what a CBRN mask is designed for is kind of like your mask to handle everything. So it'll block out tear gas. It'll block out organophosphates and pesticides and mustard gas and just chlorine gas, things that you might be subject to, but you just don't know. You're a first responder. You're getting on scene. They got this funny smell, or something like that. Military, when I was in the Army, we used to have to carry a gas mask around all the time, and that thing was a nightmare. That thing was flopped around everywhere. It was stupid. But, you're probably glad you had it if you're in a place that was potentially going to be dangerous. So, but in the case of a nuclear war, it turns out that what you're worried about is particulate matter. And so if you open up one of these CBRN masks, you're going to have all this different layers of stuff. And one of the layers is like activated charcoal and all these different layers in there to absorb these different chemicals. But the only thing stopping the particulate matter that you're concerned about in a nuclear bomb is a P100 filter media. It just has P100 in it, just like that little pink mask down in the bottom right corner there. That is a P100 filter mask. That's the ideal mask. That's the minimum mask you should have. If you want to have that tactical mask with the big thing and you want to look all like scary with that thing and you can't see, then get that one. But if you just want to be protected, then a full face respirator like this with P100 filter media on it is everything you need. Also, you could just get a respirator like this, like down at Home Depot for painting. You can buy those little discs online for like $25 for a pack of 10 sets, 10 pair, okay? And the thing about these things is that every time you go outside and you're operating outside and you're kicking up that dust, it's building up on these things. It's coming up, you're trying to breathe it in, and these are protecting you from breathing it in. It's building up on that. And all that dust is gonna stay there. And so you need to change these things out, because especially near the early stages of this, when the dust is really deep and poofy, you're gonna have a lot of radiation built up on these things. You need to get rid of those and put new ones on, because you're gonna actually get a dose on your face from the amount of radiation these things will pick up. And you'll easily be able to detect it with this, because it'll be in there. I have a regular respirator, and I have some military style, like the common dust goggles that soldiers wear, the older style, but they block the dust from getting in your eyes. And the reason you want to keep that dust out of your eyes is because if you get one radioactive contaminant in your eye, or even just caked up around your eyes, then you are risking the possibility of getting cataracts relatively quickly, which is the fogging up of the lenses in your eye, and you're going to probably need those. Contamination. thinking about like the destructive force of an 800 kiloton weapon, things are going to be pulverized into the smallest particles they can possibly be by the force of this blast. There is going to be the finest, tiniest dust, and it's going to be radioactive, and it's going to be floating around. It's going to be everywhere in the fallout. And so these fine dust particles are having a tendency to get in your clothes and in your shoes and under your watch and in your hair, your beard, everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be on your jewelry. It's going to be on your tools, your guns, everything. Everything's going to be covering it. So to minimize your exposure to that is you don't want to go outside on windy days, that's for sure, to start with. But let's go into further. To mitigate this, you want to keep it off your skin and keep it off the clothes. I don't know what world the CDC lives in where they think if you are exposed to radiation from a nuclear bomb, go inside your house and shower. I'm sorry. Didn't we just have a nuclear war? Does my shower even work? Why did you tell me to store all this water if my shower doesn't work? If my shower's going to work, I don't need all this water, right? Exactly. So you want to mitigate the effects of this stuff, and you want to keep it off of you. You may not have clothes to change into every single time you go outside, and then you take these things off and throw them away because they're too covered in radioactive dust. And what are we trying to do? Minimize our dose. You don't want that stuff collecting on your skin, and then going inside your shelter and getting it all over your shelter, and then potentially, increasing the dose of everybody in there, and then climbing into bed that night. Now, for 8 hours, you're getting dosed off your bed every time. Like, that's terrible. So you want to keep it off you. So the best way to do that, you have like a rain suit with gloves that you can tape the seams so that you can keep the dust from getting on you, even though it's very uncomfortable and you look kind of silly, with a hood that you can cinch down. Tyvek suits are cool. They're about $11 each. You can get 25, I think, for 125 bucks. So you can get a bunch of those. You want to have rubber boots only because you want to put you don't want boots that have holes in them so it's getting on your socks and stuff. You want to make sure nothing is getting in, and that you can wash it off. Either washing off rubber or washing off things that are smooth is much easier than things that have texture to it, where the particles can get in and stick to it. And if you don't have any of that, man, grab your garbage bags, pull them on. Remember you were a kid and you poked a hole and put your head through, poked your arms out each side, like that. Put them on your legs like waders. Get some of those big 50-gallon contractor bags and have some of those. That's, it's going to be a lot easier to decontaminate yourself if you can just take a suit off and put it outside than it is to have to throw your clothes away every time and take long showers of scrubbing and then constantly bringing this and just going back over and over and over again trying to find what you missed. Okay, you're still going to do that if you're wearing a suit, but at least it's going to be a lot easier, and there's going to be a lot less places that you need to wash. Decon. Have a place in your house that's separate from the main shelter area. Okay, like a lot of people in the back east, they have mud rooms, and that's a place where you come in and it's all dirty outside, and that's the place you take off your shoes. It's okay to get the floor a little bit dirty there, but you want to have a place like that that's cordoned off. You can hang some, the plastic painter drop cloths up and stuff, so that air movement doesn't take the dust out of there into your shelter area. In that place, that's where you're going to slowly disrobe, taking off your suit slowly, so you're not kicking dust up everywhere. You're keeping your mask on until you're done disrobing. Decon your whole body, make sure it's good. Then you can take off your mask. Check your face, check your hair, check everywhere, check your hands, both of them, and make sure that you don't have any contamination. And only then can you then go into your shelters, because you're pretty certain that you're not bringing contamination into your safe place. Again, having a suit massively expedites this. Should you stay or should you go? All right, that little cool vehicle there, that's called the Patton. I actually I'm the chief technical officer of this company, and I'm the guy who puts all the solar panels and solar charging system and pumps and all the things that go into this vehicle. I do that. Excellent bug out vehicle. If you have some extra cash to spend and need a bug out vehicle, there's your guy right there. So is there someplace out there that's safer to go? If there is, how do you know? So this is important stuff. Is it safer than where you're at now? If you're safe where you are and you have the supplies because you're not a lazy prepper, you probably should just stay, okay? Is it safe to travel? If you do need to leave, is it safe to leave where you're at now and get to that place? Like, are there gonna be people shooting at you? Or is it gonna be like all the roads are just decimated and you have to cross a river and the bridges are all gone, stuff like that? Can you get there? What proof do you have that it's safer where they say they are than where you're at now? And then a risk-benefit calculation, okay? Is just deciding, is it riskier to stay or riskier to go? Oh, come on. Okay, I'm also a ham radio operator, and I love this stuff. So, having a little transistor radio, battery powered or crank, that's good. Like, at a minimum, you should at least have that because you need to know what's going on. And potentially the government's going to be telling you, hopefully, the right thing to do or something. Or maybe they're going to tell you, food's available and in these zip codes, the radiation levels are low enough for you to come out and spend a half an hour outside every 3 days or something like that. You know, I don't know what they're going to say, but something like that. Having a shortwave radio is a little bit better only because you will be able to listen to ham radio operators. And I will tell you that as a ham radio operators love emergency communication, EMCOM. They love this stuff. And they're all about, and I swear to God, if there's a nuclear war, there won't be one space on that band you're going to be able to talk. There's going to be, everybody's going to be on there talking to each other. They just love this stuff. So, but having a ham radio, having an HF ham radio, high frequency, not UHF or VHF, but HF ham radio, will allow you to talk to these people. And that's really, really important. That will help you make plans, ask questions, find out things. Now, if you're talking to another ham radio operator as nerdy as I am, I bet he has these too, because we're nerdy like that. We love this stuff. So having these meters, you can ask him, hey, what's your background radiation right now? Oh, it never even raised. We haven't seen anything. Well, Jesus, that is a much safer place to go. And now coordinating with him, he might even have a place for you to go. So now those little tactical walkie-talkies and stuff, you know, you got your technician class ham radio license and now you're a ham and you got one of those. They're good for like team communication, like tactical, like, hey, I'm gonna go out, I got my radio, I'll be right back. That's all that's good for. The range on these things are not nearly good enough to provide you with emergency communications. There might be a repeater standing that's still on, because ham radio operators like EMCOM, so it's probably solar powered or something. But you might have one, so you might be able to talk to somebody around the city there, and they might be in a place that no fallout fell. So that might be beneficial. But if I had to put all my cookies in one jar, it would be the HF ham radio, and I have one. I have a 20-watt radio right now. I could set up in the parking lot out here, and I could talk all over this country pretty easily and find out what's going on, or tell people that where I'm at is safe, okay? Protection. I don't think I have to go into too much detail on this because preppers by nature just are good at this part. This is obviously going to be a period of time that the government's resources are just stretched beyond their limit. And we saw what happened with Katrina, which was just a regional event, and yet that place was wrecked, and the government didn't know what to do. So imagine if it was just, you know, countrywide. We're going to be relying on ourselves, and there's going to be people out there who, on a normal day, were cool people, and now they're desperate. They weren't prepared for this, and now they're hungry and they're thirsty, and they could potentially kill you for what you have. Also, might be some people running around who weren't prepared for this, but weren't necessarily very good people, and might take advantage of the situation to alleviate the things that you have from you. Okay, so in summary, having a plan will really help you out and give you a much bigger leg up than if you try to pull this off at the last minute when they're rattling their sabers and the DEFCON level is going down. You know, if we're sitting around at DEFCON 2 and you're trying to go buy Geiger counters, man, that's the wrong time. All right, have the gear you need. You need a high level meter This is actually an ion chamber, not a Geiger counter. But you need one that measures high levels of radiation. You need something like this for decontamination and measuring lower levels of radiation. Minimum, you gotta have this stuff. Then try to get dosimeter. Have a dosimeter, something like this, or those little civil defense things. Those things are cheap online, man. Get yourself those, then you can start keeping track and spreading the workload to prevent too many people from being super dosed, okay? Know your dosages. I gave you some basic ones, like if the needle moves on this, don't stay very long. If it moves a lot on this, don't be there. Simple, okay? And then you know some of the dosages. If you accumulate 30 Roentgens in a short period of time, that's when you're going to start seeing radiation sickness. So if you're getting sick, potentially you went over that thing, and the symptoms are very similar all the way up. So if you're experiencing confusion and then you passed out, you're probably going to die. Have a shelter ready. Know where to go. Like if you don't have a good place at your house, or if you live rurally, you're probably not going to need like a shelter from the blast, but you still might need a shelter from fallout. If you don't have anything like that and it's not realistic from you, then find a place and pre-plan going to that place, and make sure you have a way of getting the things you need to that place lickety-split, because you don't want to be caught outside when the real fallout, the initial fallout starts coming down, because you will die. You will die. Be patient. Radiation is patient. Be more patient than radiation, okay? Stay in your shelter 2 weeks. Be ready for 2 weeks in your shelter at least. When you come out after 2 weeks, now you're dealing with your cesium-137s, your strontium-90s, things like that, where you can get away with wearing a mask. But the stuff on the ground isn't just gonna like kill you through your legs like the fallout will. That stuff is horrendous. And the last thing is keep your radioactive dose as low as you can. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this, subscribe to the channel and give me a thumbs up. Helps the channel a lot. And go to www.radioactiveeverything.com and get your little radioactive source. It's uranium-238, so you can test your Geiger counter. And we'll see you on the next video.